I needed to get away. That's how all of this started. Burnout at work, a relationship falling apart in slow motion, and the kind of city noise that starts to sound like screaming if you don't sleep right for long enough. I didn't want a resort or a group tour. I wanted quiet somewhere, untouched, somewhere forgotten. That's how I ended up booking a remote lake house deep in the woods of northern Minnesota. It wasn't on any major rental sites, just a small private listing buried on a forum for wilderness retreats. The photos were grainy but compelling. A rustic wooden cabin perched right at the water's edge. A short dock stretching out onto a dark, glassy lake. No visible neighbors. The kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts again, or maybe stop hearing them entirely. I paid for 2 weeks up front and drove 8 hours in near silence. Just the occasional static from the radio when the trees weren't too thick. By the time I arrived, dusk was already swallowing the sky. The air was dense with pine and something else. Something damp and stale. The gravel road ended in front of the cabin like a dead artery. No other paths, no other signs of life. My cell service dropped to 0. I didn't care. That was the point. The cabin itself was nicer than I expected. Small, but solid. A single bedroom, an open kitchen and living room with big windows that looked out onto the lake. The dock creaked with every step, old wood warped from years of rain and cold. Beyond the dock, the lake was impossibly still, like black silk stretched tight over something that didn't want to be disturbed. That first night, I slept better than I had in months. The quiet was thick and comforting, like a blanket pressed over the world. The only sound was the occasional rustle of wind through the trees and the soft lapping of water beneath the dock. I didn't have dreams, or if I did, I didn't remember them. The strangeness started the second day, though I wouldn't call it that not at first. I walked to the end of the dock in the early morning, coffee in hand, just staring out across the lake. The surface was smooth and undisturbed. The reflection of the trees perfect. It was mesmerizing in a way that made my brain feel like it was buffering, just slightly behind my own movements. I lifted my mug to drink and caught my own reflection doing the same, except it wasn't quite right. My reflection was slower. It moved after me, not with me, just a beat late. So small a delay, I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. Or maybe the wind shifting the water. Still. I didn't like it. I turned away and went back inside. By the third day, the feeling had shifted. I didn't feel watched exactly. It was more like the opposite. Like the house and the trees and the lake were purposefully ignoring me, as if I didn't belong there, and they were simply tolerating my presence. That feeling you get when you're in someone else's house too long without saying anything. I started noticing small things. Shadows that didn't line up quite right. A ripple in the water when there was no wind. The reflection in the kitchen window showed the room behind me, but not me. Just empty space. I blinked, and it was back. I told myself it was stress. Just my mind adjusting to the isolation. That's what I wanted, wasn't it? But that night, something happened I couldn't explain away. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. No particular reason. Just the kind of wake-up that feels involuntary. The cabin was pitch black except for the silver streak of moonlight cutting through the living room window. I got up to get water and passed by the front window. I don't know what made me look outside. Maybe I heard something. Maybe I felt something. Either way, I looked on. There I was standing at the end of the dock. Just standing. The figure was silhouetted perfectly in moonlight, arms at its sides, facing the cabin. I couldn't see the face, but I didn't need to. It was wearing my clothes, my jacket, my posture, my shape. I was looking at myself, that I stood frozen, heart pounding. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink. I stared at the figure on the dock for what felt like a full minute, and then it turned and walked forward, but not toward the cabin. It walked into the water, no splash, no sound. It just descended, like stepping down invisible stairs beneath the surface. I stumbled backward and knocked over the glass in my hand. It shattered on the wooden floor, and the sound was so loud in the stillness that I nearly screamed. I didn't go outside. I couldn't. I stayed on the floor until the sun came up. When I finally went to the dock that morning, there were wet footprints leading back from the water's edge. My footprints. I wear size 11 boots. These matched exactly, but I hadn't gone outside. I was sure of that. I checked the lock on the door, still bolted, still latched. Nothing made sense. I told myself I sleepwalked. Maybe that was it. Maybe I dreamed the reflection, the figure, the descent into the water. Maybe I came out here in my sleep, but I didn't believe it. Not really. I tried to leave that day. I packed everything into my car, turned the ignition and nothing, not even a click. Battery was fine, gas was full, just dead. I tried the keys again, and the engine groaned, then fell silent, like something inside had been pulled out. There were no neighbors, no reception, no lamp. I was stuck. By day 5, I stopped sleeping. I would doze off for 10 or 15 minutes, and jolt awake, certain I'd heard something in the walls, or on the roof, or in the water. I stopped opening the curtains. I didn't want to see what might be outside, but every morning, there were new footprints on the dock. Some fresh, some soaked and drying, always my size, always leading away from the water and toward the house. On the 7th day, I saw the reflection again, not in the lake this time. In the bathroom mirror, I was brushing my teeth, staring into the mirror like a zombie, eyes ringed in exhaustion. Then I noticed I wasn't blinking. I was blinking. My face was blinking. My body was moving, but the man in the mirror wasn't. His eyes were open, wide, too wide. He wasn't brushing his teeth anymore. He was just watching me, mouth slightly parted, tongue resting behind his teeth. When I moved, he stayed still, like he was studying me. I turned off the light and backed out of the room. The door clicked shut. I stood there for what felt like hours, listening. I don't know what I was listening for. Maybe the sound of the mirror breaking. Maybe footsteps. Maybe the lock turning. That night, I dreamt I was under the water, not drowning, just below. The surface was glassy above me, the sky a warped blur. My arms didn't move. My body hung in the black like a marionette. Then I saw movement, a figure above the surface, walking along the dock. My face stood over me, and stared into the water, and slowly, I felt myself rising. I shot awake in a sweat, and ran to the mirror. My reflection was normal. It followed me, it blinked, it breathed, but I didn't trust it anymore. I covered every mirror in the house with towels, even the black screen of the turned-off TV. I couldn't risk it. On the 10th day, something changed. I was eating cold soup by the window when I heard the creak. The dock. I hadn't looked outside in days. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. I pulled the curtain back an inch and peeked through. There were 2 of them now, 2 figures, both dressed like me. One standing at the end of the dock, one halfway up, facing the cabin. They didn't move. They didn't speak. Just stood there. I backed away from the window and sat in the middle of the floor, clutching my knees like a child. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move. I waited, and eventually, the sun came up, but the figures were gone. The last day, I heard it, not outside, inside, footsteps, slow, wet, plodding across the floorboards. Even though the floor was dry, pressed my back to the closet wall and held my breath as the sounds moved through the house, room to room, then stopped, right outside the closet. A voice, soft and wrong, like someone learning to speak for the first time, whispered, "Come back." I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Eventually the footsteps moved away. When I finally opened the door, the house was empty. That morning, the car started. It just started, like it had been waiting. I drove away and never looked back, but sometimes, in the mirror, I still see them, not behind me, not beside me, instead of me, looking out with wide eyes, unmoving lips, and a stillness that doesn't belong in this world. And I wonder, if they stayed in the lake, then who came back? The lake house had been in my wife's family for 3 generations, though no one really used it anymore. Her grandfather built it sometime in the 1950s, a plain, weather-worn thing of red cedar and dark stone tucked into a forgotten corner of Upper Michigan, far enough from the nearest town that you couldn't hear anything but wind and water. Her parents used to take summer trips there, and she spent parts of her childhood chasing frogs and catching fireflies on the back deck. But then her uncle drowned in the lake when he was 19, and after that, nobody seemed eager to go anymore. It just sat there, empty, waiting. She never spoke much about that part of it, just said the place gave her weird dreams and laughed it off. But after the miscarriage, when the air in our apartment started to feel heavy and sour, and we couldn't look at each other without falling apart, she suggested we go. Just for a little while, she said, somewhere quiet. We packed the car with everything we thought we might need, clothes, groceries, our old wedding photo album, and drove north. It rained the whole way. Thick, cold drops that made the forest look darker than it was, and every tree along the side of the road looked like it was leaning in just a little too close. The house was smaller than I expected. One story, but long, like a cabin that had been added onto in odd places over the decades. The dock out back stretched maybe 30 feet into the lake, with warped boards and moss growing between the cracks. The water itself was strange, so dark it looked almost black, with no fish or ripples or any movement at all, like a puddle in the center of the world. The first 2 nights were uneventful. We didn't talk much, ate frozen dinners, sat on the porch until the mosquitoes got bad. I couldn't sleep. Not well, anyway. The bed was too soft, and the silence wasn't peaceful. It was complete, like the house was sealed off from everything. My ears would ring at night just from the absence of noise. On the 3rd night, I awoke to knocking. Not loud, just deliberate. 3 short raps on the front door. I checked my phone. 2:14 a.m. My wife didn't stir. I waited. No more knocking, just the sound of my own pulse in my ears. Eventually, I got up and peeked through the small window beside the door. There was no one there. I didn't open it, just stood there for a while, watching the stillness outside. There were no animals, no bugs, just fog. I went back to bed and tried to tell myself it had been a dream. The next morning, I asked my wife if she'd heard anything. She shook her head and poured herself coffee without looking at me. Her skin looked pale in the morning light, like paper, soaked in milk. I asked again if she was okay. She said she was just tired. But she didn't eat anything that day, and I noticed her staring out at the lake for long stretches without blinking. That night, it happened again. 2:14 a.m., 3 knocks. Got up faster this time and looked through the window, and this time, someone was there. It was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She was dripping wet hair plastered to her forehead, dress clinging to her skin like seaweed. Her skin was pale, almost bluish, like she'd been in the water too long. She didn't move, just stood there, staring at the door. Her eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, like deep wells with no bottom. She didn't knock again, just waited. I stood frozen. My mouth went dry. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to open the door, not to acknowledge her. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off her. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found tiny wet footprints on the porch, bare feet, leading away from the door and down the steps. They vanished before they reached the tree line. When I told my wife, she just looked at me, expressionless. Elijah used to talk about a little girl like that, she said finally. What do you mean? She hesitated. When we were kids, he said she'd knock on his window at night, ask to come in. He thought she lived in the lake. Elijah, your cousin who my uncle, she corrected, the one who drowned. I didn't know what to say. I felt the air shift in the room, like the temperature dropped just a few degrees. My skin prickled. She looked so calm, saying it, like she wasn't surprised. That night, I sat by the front window with the lights off. I wanted to be ready. At 2:14 a.m., right on time, there were 3 knocks. She was there again, the little girl, same soaked dress, same black eyes. But this time, she spoke. Is Elijah home? She asked. Her voice wasn't childlike, not really. It was breathy, too soft, like it came from underwater. I didn't answer. She stood there for maybe a minute longer, before turning and walking down the steps into the darkness. I didn't see where she went. After that, it got worse. Every night she came, always the same time, always the same knock, and every time she asked the same question, is Elijah home? On the 5th night, I didn't go to the window. I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep, but I could still hear her, knocking, whispering, walking in slow circles around the house. By the 6th night, I started hearing the door creak even though I knew it was locked. I heard wet feet on the floorboards, dripping, padding, stopping outside the bedroom. My wife didn't react, just stared at the ceiling. She's looking for him, she said. Who is she? I think she drowned too. I stared at her. You'd think. She blinked slowly, like coming out of a trance. I think she wants someone to take his place. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed our bags that morning, told her we were leaving. She didn't protest, just nodded and went to sit on the dock. I left her there while I loaded the car. When I came back to get her, she was gone. I called her name for hours, walked the entire perimeter of the lake. No sign of her, not even a footprint. When I returned to the house, the front door was open. Inside, it was cold. Not just cool cold, like a freezer. My breath fogged. The wet footprints led from the threshold to the bedroom and disappeared at the foot of the bed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, eyes fixed on the door. 2:14 a.m. 3 knocks. I stood up slowly, heart hammering in my chest. Walked to the door, put my hand on the knob, but I didn't open it. I just whispered, "He's not home." There was silence. Then, a single word, whispered through the door, "Okay." The knocking never came again. The next day, I drove into town and called the sheriff. Search parties combed the woods. Divers searched the lake. No sign of my wife. They questioned me for days. Eventually, they told me it was a tragic disappearance. Probably drowned. Probably suicide. I didn't argue. It's been almost a year now. I live alone in a cramped apartment back in the city. I've tried to forget. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I check the clock. And when it reads 2:14 a.m., I hold my breath, waiting for that knock. Because one of these nights, I think she's going to ask a different question. And I don't know what I'll say when she asks for me. There were 6 of us that weekend, and if I could go back, I wouldn't have said yes to that trip. Not because we weren't close, we were, still are, some of us. But that lake, that cabin, that floating dock, it did something to us. Changed something we didn't know could be changed. It was late August when we arrived. One last summer weekend before classes resumed. The trip had been my friend Keegan's idea. His family had a property near Lake Zoya, way off-grid, barely mapped. The lake house itself wasn't much more than a squat wooden structure buried in the trees. No internet, no power, except for a sputtering generator we only turned on at night. But there was beer, a canoe, and the kind of silence that made you forget there was a world outside. The floating dock was what made it feel like a vacation. It wasn't attached to the shore, just a wide wooden platform floating in the middle of the lake, maybe 30 feet out. No rails, no ladder, just thick planks and rusted metal loops at the corners. We had to swim to it. Keegan said it had been there since his dad was a kid. "Don't worry," he'd joked. "If anything lives under there, it's probably too old to swim." The first 2 days were uneventful. We drank, grilled hot dogs over fire, and dared each other to dive off the floating dock at night. The water was warm on the surface, but turned icy the moment you kicked down into the dark. At night, the lake went silent. That was the part that felt wrong, not peaceful, just muted. Even frogs and crickets didn't make noise. It was like the whole lake held its breath after sunset. The first strange thing happened on the 3rd morning. We were eating breakfast on the porch when Keegan pointed out toward the dock. "Was someone out there last night?" We all looked. The dock bobbed gently in the water. Nothing unusual except for the long, wet streaks on the planks, like something had dragged itself out of the lake, then stopped at it first. We thought maybe it was one of us drunkens swimming in the early morning, but no one admitted to it. And when I asked Keegan if it ever got waterlogged like that before, he just shrugged. "Not unless it rains." And it didn't rain. Later that day, Max, quietest of the group, went for a solo swim to the dock. He stayed there longer than I expected, lying on his back with his arms outstretched. When he came back, he looked shaken. "I dove under it," he told us quietly. We were all gathered around the fire pit. The sun was dropping fast behind the trees. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I swam under the dock, just for a second. Wanted to see what was underneath," and his face was pale. "It's deeper than it should be, like it goes down forever." I couldn't see the bottom, and something touched my foot. We laughed it off at first. Keegan tossed a beer can at him and called him a liar. Max didn't argue. He just stared into the fire. That night, I woke up with the feeling that something was pressing down on my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I lay there, paralyzed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something cold and wet drip down the side of my neck. When I finally jerked free, gasping, there was nothing in the room, but the floor beside my bed was wet, and so were the sheets. I didn't tell the others. The next day, Keegan suggested a game. "Let's all swim out to the dock together. One at a time, dive underneath it, touch the center support beam. See who's brave enough to stay under the longest." Max refused immediately. So did Amy. But the rest of me, Keegan, Donnie, and Trevor said yes, because we didn't think it was real. Not then. Just the woods playing tricks on us. The sun was high when we swam out. The dock bobbed gently under our weight as we hauled ourselves up. Donnie went first. She dove under, came up 10 seconds later, grinning, Creepy as hell down there, she said, shaking water from her ears, but empty. Trevor went next. Longer, maybe 20 seconds. When he surfaced, he looked rattled, didn't say anything. Just climbed up and sat on the edge, staring at the trees. Then, it was my turn. I dove. The water swallowed me whole. Immediately, everything went cold. Deeper than it should have been. I opened my eyes for just a moment, and regretted it. There were ropes hanging beneath the dock. Not just support ropes, no. These were frayed, algae-covered, floating just beneath the surface. Some knotted, some snapped, and tied to them, dangling. In the dark, were toys, small ones, dolls, plastic boats, a pair of tiny water shoes, all of it decaying. Then something moved behind them. I didn't wait. I kicked to the surface, splashing, coughing, dragging myself up onto the dock without speaking. What you see? Keegan asked, laughing. Nothing. I lied. But I saw the ropes again that night. In my dreams, they reached out like fingers. That evening, Max was gone. We searched the property, the woods, the lake. Nothing. No footprints. No trail. His clothes were still in the cabin. His phone still on the charger. Just gone. The local authorities were hours away, and without cell service, we couldn't call anyone. Keegan suggested he got spooked and took off. Maybe tried to walk to the nearest town, but he didn't have a car, I said. Or shoes. Or food. Keegan didn't have an answer for that. None of us slept. We stayed in the main room, sleeping bags on the floor, eyes on the windows. Just before dawn, we heard footsteps on the dock. Heavy, slow. They reached the edge and stopped. When we went outside with flashlights, the dock was empty, but the ropes had surfaced. Dozens of them, tangled and swaying like they were alive. I wanted to leave. I said so, loudly, but Keegan argued, we don't leave Max. Not until we know. The next day, Donnie went missing. This time, there was no doubt. We heard her scream from the dock. We all ran out, barefoot, barely dressed, but the dock was empty again. Just wet footprints, leading to the edge, and then gone. By then, the group had broken. Trevor wouldn't speak. He just stared out the window, mouth slightly open. Keegan paced the cabin, muttering to himself about testing the theory. When I asked what he meant, he just said, something lives down there. Something ancient. It's not the lake, it's beneath the lake. I didn't ask again. That night, Trevor walked into the lake. I watched him do it. From the porch, he didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, just walked straight out, eyes blank, until the water took him. No splash, no struggle. Gone. I didn't sleep, just sat on the porch, shotgun in hand, watching the dock. Keegan sat next to me, silent. We didn't speak for hours. Then, just before dawn, he whispered, I saw it when I was a kid. I turned slowly. What? The first time I came out here, my dad made me dive under the dock, said it was a rite of passage, but I never touched the beam. I saw what was down there. What was it? He didn't answer, just stood and started walking toward the lake. Keegan, I stood too. Stay here, he said. If I don't come back, burn the dock. Then he dove. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then the ropes began to rise. Dozens of them, all around the dock, twisting together, tangling like they were pulling something apart beneath the surface. And then I saw it just for a moment. A shape in the water. Not Keegan. Something bigger. Something wrong. I ran back to the cabin and grabbed the last can of gas, poured it down the dock, flicked a match. It went up in seconds. The flames snapped loud against the morning silence. The ropes writhed, then sank. And I left. I walked the gravel road until I found service, then called the sheriff. I told them what happened. They didn't believe me, just said it was a tragic accident. They found one body. Max. Tangled in fishing line. No sign of Donnie, or Trevor, or Keegan. No sign of the dock either. The fire had burned it completely. Nothing left but scorched waterline, and a few melted loops of rope. It's been 6 years. I don't swim anymore. Can't look at deep water. If I see a floating dock, I look away, because I think whatever it was under there, it's still alive, still waiting. And sometimes, in my dreams, I see new ropes floating in the dark, swaying beneath the surface, with names carved into the planks above them, and the last one. It says mine. It says mine. My name's Dean, and the story I'm about to share has never sat right with me. I've told a few people in private, but most think I just got too high, or that I'm exaggerating because of sleep deprivation. But I wasn't high, and I remember every godforsaken second of that weekend like it was seared into my brain with a branding iron. It happened in the summer of 2020, right after lockdowns began to lift and everyone was scrambling to reclaim some piece of normalcy. That's when my wife, my younger brother, and two of our close friends rented a lake house near Mallard Lake in rural Michigan for a long weekend. It was supposed to be a peaceful getaway, hiking, grilling, drinking by the fire. A way to shake off the endless screen time and isolation. We'd found the place through a rental site. The photos showed this cozy A-frame cabin nestled among trees, right up against the water, with a private dock and a canoe. The listing emphasized how remote it was, no neighbors for a half-mile in either direction. It said, which we thought was a selling point at the time. We arrived on a Thursday evening. The drive up was uneventful, winding rural roads, thick woods on either side, the occasional faded barn or rusted-out mailbox. Cell service began to cut out about 20 minutes from the lake. No big deal, we thought. Disconnecting was part of the point. When we pulled up, everything matched the photos. It was quiet, idyllic even. Trees framed the house like arms, their leaves filtering the golden dusk light. The lake shimmered behind the property. Not another soul in sight. No birdsong either. Not that we noticed at the time. We spent the first night settling in. My brother Rick and our friend Kelsey took the loft bedroom. My wife Maria and I got the ground floor. Our other friend Ty took the basement, which opened up directly to the back patio overlooking the lake. We grilled brats, drank a little too much, and ended the night stargazing. That first night was normal. We laughed a lot. It didn't stay normal. The first sign that something was off came around 3:12 a.m. I know the time because I checked the clock. I'd woken up because I heard something tapping against the glass door that led to the back patio. Tap, 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 soft, rhythmic. At first, I thought it might be a tree branch, but we weren't close enough to any trees. Then I figured maybe it was a raccoon or a deer. I got up, pulled the curtain aside, and peered out. There was nothing there. Just the dock illuminated by the moonlight. The lake was still, black, oily. I stood there for a moment, staring. That's when I noticed something floating, maybe 50 feet out from the dock. It looked like a trash bag at first, bobbing gently. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds, and then it moved. I don't mean it drifted, I mean it moved. Deliberately. It sank slowly beneath the surface, like it knew I was watching. I didn't say anything the next morning, didn't want to sound paranoid. We spent the day hiking, taking turns with the canoe, skipping rocks. Kelsey even tried to fish, but said the water was too quiet, not even a nibble. Around dusk, Ty brought up something weird. Hey, he said, did anyone else hear tapping last night? Like, glass tapping? I froze. Yeah, I said. You too. Ty nodded slowly. Basement windows. I thought it was a bird or something, but I looked and didn't see anything. Kinda creeped me out. Rick and Kelsey hadn't heard it. Maria had slept through the whole night. I brushed it off again. Probably animals. That second night the air felt different. The silence around the lake was more pronounced. No bugs. No frogs. No wind. Just dead stillness, like the whole place was holding its breath. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke again. Same sound. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder. I got up, crossed the room, and gently peeled the curtain back. And there it was again. The thing, floating just off the end of the dock. Only this time it wasn't bobbing. It was upright, like someone treading water, but without any arm motion. Just still. Its shape was wrong, vaguely human but elongated. It was dark, but I could make out wet, stringy hair draped over its head. No visible arms, no face. I backed away slowly. I felt sick, not scared yet, just wrong. Like I was looking at something I shouldn't see. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, just lay there, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. The next morning, I tried to check the dock. I walked to the edge and looked out into the lake. Nothing. Not even ripples. The water looked fake, like it was covered in cellophane. But something else caught my eye. There were footprints, wet bare, leading from the edge of the dock back toward the house, but only halfway. They just stopped on the grass. Like the person, or whatever it was, vanished mid-stride. That time, I told the others. Rick laughed it off, said I probably dreamed it. Ty looked pale. Maria said maybe it was a raccoon again. Kelsey just stared at the footprints. That night we drank more than we should have. Everyone was a little on edge, jumpy. Ty offered to sleep in the living room, on the couch. He said he didn't want to be alone in the basement again. At 3:10 a.m., the screaming started. It was Kelsey. By the time I got up the stairs, Rick was already holding her. She was sobbing, pointing at the loft window. There was someone standing out there, she said, right outside the glass. Just standing, watching. We turned on every light in the house, armed ourselves with kitchen knives. I even grabbed a hatchet from the woodshed. We checked every door, locked, every window, locked, nothing outside, no tracks. After that, nobody went back to sleep. The next day we voted to leave early, cut the trip short, but when we tried to start the SUV, the battery was dead. Just dead. We couldn't even unlock the doors. No one had drained it. Nothing had been left on. It was a new vehicle. Maria tried to call for help. No signal. Ty tried his phone. Same. Even GPS wouldn't load. That was when I felt the dread settle in fully. Like we were in some kind of bubba cutoff. The thing showed up again that night. 3:13 a.m. I was awake this time, sitting in the living room with a flashlight and the hatchet. The others were scattered across the main floor. No one wanted to be alone. Ty was staring out the glass door. He whispered, "Dean, it's there again." I stood and walked to him. My breath caught. It was closer this time. Standing at the foot of the dock, head tilted, just watching. The hair was still matted, soaked. Its skin looked gray, bloated. No eyes, just black sockets. Rick said, "What the hell is that?" And then it stepped forward into the water, but it didn't sink. It walked on the surface, like it was just beneath a layer of glass. Silent, toward the shore. Toward us. We screamed, ran, slid the heavy dining table against the patio door. The lights flickered. The tapping started again. Harder, faster. Windows, walls, the ceiling. Then, a wet, dragging sound across the roof. And then, it all stopped. Silence. We didn't sleep. Just sat there, armed, waiting for sunrise. When dawn finally came, everything looked normal, like nothing had happened. Even the car started. We packed in 10 minutes flat. We didn't speak the whole drive back. No one mentioned the floating thing. But here's the part that really gets under my skin. 2 months later, Kelsey sent me a link. The Mallard Lake cabin. It was back on the rental site. Same photos, but the description had changed. Now it said, "Please, do not enter the lake. Swimming strictly prohibited. Use of the dock after sunset is not recommended." I still don't know what we saw, but sometimes when I wake up around 3:13 a.m., I swear, I can still hear the tapping, and I wonder if it ever really stayed at the lake. Or if we brought it back with us. It was supposed to be a digital detox. No phones, no internet, no emails, just for days at a lake house in northern Wisconsin with my younger brother, Kyle. We'd done something similar every summer since college, and this year we decided to find someplace truly remote, off-grid, no distractions, just the cabin, the lake, and the woods. Our goal was to fish, hike, and maybe finally talk through the awkward silence that had been growing between us for years. We found the listing through a backdoor forum Kyle frequented, not Airbnb or any mainstream rental platform. This was a forum for outdoor survivalists, and someone named Tagline72 posted a message about a primitive lakefront retreat. The photos looked grainy, like they'd been taken on a disposable camera, but the place looked perfect. A small, A-frame cabin, surrounded by pines, with a long dock stretching out into a placid, foggy lake. The description was sparse. For miles off County Road L, past the second gate. Bring everything. No amenities, no power, no cell service. A handwritten sign on a tree in one of the pictures simply said, "Hail Lake Cabin." Kyle messaged the guy. They sent us directions that weren't coordinates, but step-by-step turns, like something from the 1980s. Turn left at the burned-out truck. Count 17 fence posts and veer right. That kind of thing. We left on a Thursday morning, mid-July. The sun was hot, the air thick with the smell of pine and pollen. We had a big blue cooler packed with food and beer, fishing rods strapped to the roof rack, and a machete. Kyle insisted we bring 4 trail clearing, though I doubted we'd need it. We made it to County Road L by early afternoon. That's where the GPS stopped working. No signal, just like they'd said. We followed the directions, past the rusted truck, past the gate that looked more like a fallen tree someone had propped up. And eventually, after 20 minutes of bouncing down a narrow, winding path that barely qualified as a road, we found the cabin, nestled in a clearing, just like the photo. A simple A-frame with moss on the shingles and one cloudy window staring out at the lake. The lake itself was still, not a single ripple despite the breeze. No ducks, no bugs skimming across the surface. Just a motionless sheet of dark water. The tree line across the shore was dense and strange-looking pine trees that seemed too tall and narrow, almost unnaturally uniform, like rows of sharpened pencils. I got out of the car and immediately noticed the quiet, not peaceful, serene quiet, but the kind of hush you notice in a funeral home. No wind through the trees, no birds, just a distant, ever-present hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Creepy place, I joked. Kyle grinned. Exactly the point. We unpacked, and the first red flag was the inside of the cabin. It didn't match the photos. The pictures showed a basic interior with wooden bunks, a small table, and a wood stove. What we found was an open space with nothing but a dusty mattress in the center of the floor. No bunks, no stove, no furniture. Just a bare room with walls that felt wrong, not rotten, but soft, like the wood wasn't dry, like it still breathed. This can't be the same place, I said. Look at the photos again. Kyle shrugged. I downloaded them. Hold on. He pulled up the folder on his phone, but the pictures were gone. Just black squares with file names like image001.jpg and untitled5.png. He tapped one. It opened, then closed on its own. I brushed it off. Maybe a glitch. Phones get weird when they can't connect. I chalked it up to that. We set up sleeping bags on the mattress and cracked open a couple beers. Kyle built a fire outside, and we watched the sunset spill across the lake. Still no movement on the water. Not even a single fish jumping. No insects buzzing around the flames. It felt like we were on another planet. Around 10 p.m., I noticed something on the far shore. A flicker of light. At first, I thought it was lightning, but it was too localized. Like a flashlight beam moving through the trees, back and forth, steady, deliberate. Do people live out here? I asked. Kyle shook his head. There's nothing on the maps. This lake isn't even labeled on Google Earth. We watched as the beam moved slowly along the opposite shore, and then stopped, dead center across from us. Like whoever held it had spotted us. The light didn't move for a long time, just held there, steady, watching. Kyle raised his beer in mock salute. Cheers, neighbor. I didn't laugh. The light blinked off. We both stared into the darkness, waiting for it to reappear. It didn't. We went inside soon after, locking the cabin door with the crude metal latch. I barely slept. The air inside was heavy, like being buried under wet blankets. At one point, I thought I heard something skimming the cabin walls from outside, a dragging sound, then scratching, faint but constant. I held my breath and listened for 10 straight minutes, but it never grew louder. It just kept going. By morning, it was gone. Kyle slept through it, snoring. Day 2, we tried to fish. Not a single bite. The water was eerily clear, and I swear I could see straight to the bottom in the shallows. No fish, no weeds, just smooth, clean sand and these strange, thin indentations, like lines in the lake bed, but not made by water. Almost like drag marks. Long, curving trails that intersected and disappeared into deeper water. I looked at Kyle. This lake is dead, man. Nothing lives here. Maybe it's just overfished, he offered, clearly unconvinced. Later that day, we hiked a trail that led around the lake. It curved into thicker woods, and somewhere around the southern bend, we found a second cabin. It wasn't on any map, it wasn't in the listing, but it looked like ours. Same F-frame shape, same cloudy window, but this one was different. The door was open. Inside there was furniture, but everything was covered in old, stained sheets. We pulled one back and found a table with deep gouges in the wood, like someone had clawed it with a knife. On the wall, scratched into the surface, were words, not in English, some script that curved and looped like vines. I couldn't read it, but it made my head hurt just looking at it. Kyle backed out first. I don't like this, he said. Let's go. That night, it rained, and something moved outside the cabin. I heard footsteps, not heavy, booted steps, but soft, wet ones, like bare feet squelching in mud. They circled the cabin, paused at the window. I didn't dare look. I just lay there frozen, listening. And then the door latch creaked slowly. One click, then another. I sat up, heart pounding, and grabbed the machete from the floor. The door didn't open, but something pressed against it. A shape just visible in the moonlight seeping through the window. Tall, thin, its head cocked to the side, like it was listening. I heard a voice, a whisper, not the same. And then, it was gone. The next morning, there were wet footprints all around the cabin. Dozens of them, some leading to the water, others disappearing into the trees. I told Kyle. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he showed me a notebook he found inside the second cabin. It wasn't a journal, more like a record. Dozens of entries. Each one had a date, 2 names, and the words, replaced. The most recent entry was ours. Kaimat replaced. The entry was dated for days. Ahead. We left immediately, but we never made it to the car. The road was gone. Not overgrown, gone, like it had never been there. Just thick trees in every direction. No trail, no tire tracks. Kyle screamed in frustration. I tried retracing our steps with the compass, but every direction looked the same. The trees were too uniform, like they'd been planted on purpose. We wandered for hours. Eventually, we found our way back to the cabin, but it wasn't ours. This one had no window. The door was open. Inside were 2 sleeping bags, a cooler, our fishing rods, everything exactly as we'd left it. Except we were already there. 2 people, lying still, in our sleeping bags, motionless. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Kyle vomited in the corner. We backed out slowly and ran into the trees. We didn't stop. Not until night fell again. I don't know how long we've been walking. Time feels strange out here. Some nights I see lights on the other side of the lake. Sometimes I hear my own voice calling from the woods. Kyle stopped talking 2 nights ago. He just stares now. I found the notebook again yesterday. New entry. Replaced. Under it, the names were crossed out, and in their place, 2 words, still wandering, still wandering.